chair of the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee of Community Board 4. Welcome, thanks for being here tonight. I'm joined by my co-chair, Marty DeCat, who is somewhere on your screen in one of these squares. And as we've been through this routine before, we are holding this meeting under the Governor's Executive Order 202.1 as it relates to holding public meetings via Zoom. We'll be running through the presentation this evening. There will be questions and comments from the committee. After that, we will take questions and comments from the public, and we'll bring it back to committee for further discussion and take it from there. Like I said, I know we have quorum. We've got quite a good attendance this evening. And so we'll take this as we always do, asking folks to please use the raise hand function. This gives Janine the opportunity to bring the public over when the time comes, and for us to make sure that we have a efficient and respectful conversation. We have a number of guests with us this evening for the presentation regarding Pier 76 that the Trust is going to give us, but I want to recognize Commissioner Basil Sagos and Commissioner Eric Kulisade for joining us tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm sure we'll hear from you a little bit later. But with that, I'd like to pass it over to Madeline at the Hudson River Park Trust.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So I was going to introduce the team here. And of course, we have our chair, Commissioner Sagos, and also another board member of the Trust, Commissioner Kulisade from the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. And we are also joined by Lisa Switkin and James Tenehouse from James Corner Field Operations. James Corner Field Operations has been working with us and the task force for the year, working on the project that the governor had given us, which we'll get into in a few moments. So I think this is the first time you're meeting them. Lisa is also the lead designer on Gansevoort Peninsula, and that's how she's with us tonight and during this year of task force meetings. We're also joined by someone I hardly have to introduce, Carl Weisbrod from HRNA, and Tina Pecorelli, who have also worked with us on different financing options for the park, and during the task force. We'll review some of this today, but before we start, and who's running the presentation tonight?
Janine will drive, so they'll just say next slide for her to advance it.
Okay, wonderful. So before we get started, I'm going to call on our chair, Commissioner Sagos, to say a few words.
Great, thanks, Madeline, Jeffrey, Lowell, Martin, and everybody on CB4. It's great to see you all. So you all said it right in the beginning. This is a meeting about Pier 76. Just a few comments up front. As you all know, we are totally committed to the long term of Pier 76. Its ultimate and hopefully perfect build out, and doing so in very close conjunction with CB4 on a really exhaustive design process, recognizing that will take a long time. So the focus now is really on the immediate term. As you know, the law that the legislature and the governor put in place this spring requires the city to vacate the tow pound by the end of this year. So the state would get possession on the 1st of January. So we're proceeding along that track right now. And the question then is raised, what can we do in the interim? Once we tear the tow pound down, the shed itself, what interim uses can we put in place immediately upon removing the shed that would create that, that blank slate, if you will, so that once the more exhaustive planning process takes place for the long term, what can be done for the short term to bring much needed open space to CB4 So that's really the question today. We'll get into this great presentation, see some of what the team has been working on, which is, I think, very exciting, but is also importantly, you'll see that the uses are very interim in nature. And that's a very important thing I know from speaking with many of you. So we're looking forward to working with CB4 on this. Great partners already, and certainly great partners all across the board with the Park Trust. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing the slides.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Janine, if you're ready, we can get started. Thank you. Next. So this is the agenda for tonight. Next. If I haven't thanked you already, thank you all for being here. As you know, the Hudson River Park Act was amended in 2013. And in that amendment, it was made clear that the city had to use best efforts to relocate the tow pound off of Pier 76, and that it would be at least 50% recreation, and the balance of it would be used for park commercial uses so that the trust could continue to maintain and operate the park at the level that you've all come to expect it. Next. What has changed this year is that in the budget bill in April 1, 2020, the New York State legislature had passed a bill, and the governor signed it, which said that New York City had to cease using Pier 76 for a tow pound or pay the park $12 million by the end of this year. Starting February 1, they were to pay the park $3 million a month for using Pier 76 as a tow pound, and that they could have their fees waived if they showed evidence of an effort to relocate the tow pound. Next. So that has this budget, as Commissioner Sagos has said, this budget bill has enabled us to really think about not just the long-term plan for Pier 76, because as you know, from going down the road with us on Pier 57, with all the process that takes place and the planning and ULURP and the EIS, it takes a very long time to get to a permanent project. However, if and when the tow pound leaves, we do have this wonderful, almost 6-acre site that is needed and wanted by the community, and we could have, and you all know, some wonderful uses that the park has done on an interim basis that you've all come to know and love in the past, and we could, again, start using the pier for these interim uses very quickly. However, we do want to say that we are very cognizant that what the community wants is a long-term plan. We have spent the better part of the last year with the task force thinking about the long-term plan, at least in concept, and this has nothing to do with planning the pier without Community Board 4. This is just a concept of how we might be able to move forward. Next. The assignment that the governor gave us was to both figure out how to get the maximum amount of open space on both Piers 40 and 76, and to reach a consensus also about how we could get there, how we could raise enough revenue from these two piers as well to help operate the park, and to give the governor these recommendations by May 1. Obviously, because of COVID, we never got to formal recommendations, and that was put on hold. Next. We wanted you to get a look at who was on this task force. I believe we had 6 meetings of the task force since January. And as you can see, your board is well represented as well as your elected officials. Next. Now I'm going to hand it over to Carl Weisbrod, who will talk about the park and its future funding gap.
Thanks, Madeline. First, I'm happy to be back before Community Board 4 again. It's been quite a while, and I'm particularly happy to be back on an issue regarding Hudson River Park. And as Commissioner Sago said, the focus tonight is really on the short term here, but as Madeline said, we should also bear in mind the long term. And as she indicated, the task force was really looking at how to get to the point of a stabilized park that maintains the quality that we've seen in the park so far, most recently on Pier 26. And in order to do that, we really need to ramp up, in the long run, new annual revenues to fund capital maintenance, not to fund the finalization of the park and the build out of the park, but to maintain it in a high quality fashion once it is built out and as it is built out. And unless there are additional resources over time, we won't be able to do that, and we'll see essential capital maintenance deferred and a reduction in operations and services. So the ground rents to HRPT for this redevelopment really will require in the long run revenues from Pier 40 and Pier 76. They're the most reliable revenue sources, and they are in fact essential to help close the gap that's going to be needed to maintain the park. Next slide, please. But what we wanted to do was look at a whole range of potential revenue sources, starting from the most public to the most private, which is ultimately Piers 40 and 76 producing some revenues. We looked at what other tax revenues we could get, what other city and state grants might potentially be available. We looked at a park improvement district. We looked at the sale of air rights in the park as the park did so successfully on Pier 40, new park concessions, in-park revenues that could be boosted, sponsorships, private fundraising. All of these are potential sources, but the goal we always knew was, how do we try to maximize the open space on Piers 40 and 76, recognizing that we're going to need some development and revenues from them in the long range. And next, I will turn this back over to who? Madeline. Next slide.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Yes, thanks, Carl, and thanks, Madeline, and hello, everybody at CB4. So I just wanted to take you through some of the work that was done towards the long-term planning that we had talked about at the beginning, which was the goal of the task force to begin with. And this is just for context. Many of you are probably familiar, of course, with the site, but note the sort of scale of the pier. It is very, very large. And the relative heights of the sort of surrounding context. So you can see the 110 feet as well as the 150 foot height for the sort of top of the Javits Crystal Palace that you see in the back of the image. Next. So as part of the work on the task force, we sort of came to 2 different scenarios, and these were really not meant to be the only options. They were rather meant to sort of look at 2 alternative ways to achieve those primary goals of both financial sustainability for Hudson River Park, as well as the maximized open space. And the image to the left really showed what the act required, that sort of minimal 50% open space recreational condition. And the image to the right was an alternative. And this idea consolidated the development to the north, where you have the more commercial uses, and therefore allocating much more open space. I think this was close to 80% overall, and also a much more visible and inviting entry, so that when you actually came to the site, it would be a sort of very clear signal that this was open and public. And a lot of the feedback really gravitated towards that second option. Next. And so this is just meant to acknowledge that that long-term planning and that option, actually either of the options, would require legislative changes, and that would include a series of different things, including potentially even a sort of physical swap of a portion of the pier to the south to the north, in order to allow for that consolidated development to the north. Next. Carl, back to you.
Yeah, so as we all knew, well before we finished our final report due at the beginning of May, COVID hit, and that has changed the immediate term economics of how we can, in the long term, stabilize the park and stabilize the park's revenues and get the revenues we need for long-term, high-quality maintenance of the park. And so we don't know, obviously, at this point, exactly how and when the economy is going to recover, how fast it's going to recover. We still are optimistic about the various different revenue sources we presented in March and February as long-term options. But in the short term, we really have begun, as the commissioner said, and as Madeline said, to shift our immediate focus to Pier 76 and see what could possibly happen in the short term. Next slide, please. And the long-term timeline clearly is, next slide. The long-term timeline is clearly an economic recovery. We don't know how long that will take. Long-term development of the pier that will require an RFP process, environmental and regulatory approvals, repairs of the piers, design, construction. This process, again, we can't put an absolute time frame on it, but let's face it, it is going to be a while. And even though that is the long-term goal, we wanted to see what could possibly happen in the shorter term, assuming the tow pound leaves. So next slide. If we can put an interim public open space on Pier 76, we can span this period of uncertainty and a period of even moving toward permanent development of the pier and permanent use of the pier to bring the pier into some public use in the immediate term. And with that, I will turn it back. At least that's the concept, and we think it's a good concept. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Lisa.
Great, thanks. You can go to the next slide. So I don't need to really tell anyone who's part of Community Board 4, but I think that one of the reasons, with the focus on Pier 76, outside of the fact, of course, of this immediate opportunity with the potential relocation of the tow pound, is also just that Community Board 4 really has a dearth and lack of open space. This is showing the rings on this drawing, shows a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute walk, a 15-minute walk. And, the sort of need here, as you well know, is incredible. And so it provides a real opportunity in that context, even more so. Next. So a couple different assumptions just for the interim use. Obviously that this requires first and foremost the relocation of the tow pound by the city, as well as the demolition of the building. And then, you know, this moment really allows for a great opportunity to allow access to happen sooner rather than later. And but that this all is sort of based on two primary assumptions. One is that there is a sort of limited load capacity. So the existing structure, you know, really can support asphalt, temporary lighting, seating, surface improvements, things like that. We're not talking about large quantities of soils, trees, et cetera. And two, that there will be an overall limited lifespan depending on the marine borer destruction, which is really what happens to the piles as they sort of get invaded and over time can erode. And so those two things, along with a desire that we heard loud and clear that the sort of interim uses be intentionally interim, to ensure both that the long-term planning of the park would happen, but also just given funding, et cetera. And so those three things have really helped to kind of, you know, frame the different uses that we're gonna put forward tonight for discussion and hopefully for you to add to. Next. So we wanted to share just a couple, hopefully inspirational images. You know, the ones on this page, three of them are actually here at Hudson River Park, as Madeline alluded to. There's been a number of really successful interim uses that have already happened. The idea of having things like outdoor dancing, food festivals, food and wine, you know, all sorts of things like that. Just public access and being able to sort of go out on the pier in a big space like this, especially during a time like this, is incredible. And the upper images from a project that we worked on in Seattle, where you can sort of see this idea of just a very minimal pier. It's sort of a, you know, blank slate for many different types of activities and events to happen. Next slide. There's also some really interesting opportunities for art, community-based art, as well as potentially public art. You know, these are just some ideas, again, working within those sort of limited load capacities, et cetera, but that can really enliven the space and also provide great inspiration and activation. Next. These are other activities that are a bit more active, things like potentially roller rinks or dance floors, learning to bike, which is something that Hudson River Park has done, where you can sort of do that in a safe environment, different types of sort of food and beverage, sitting, hanging out, et cetera. Next. And also things that are a little bit, you know, more geared towards specific, whether it's children's and education and kind of play, just sort of relaxation, or even things like outdoor fitness. So again, these were sort of just meant as both prompts and inspiration. You can go to the next slide, that's fine. So just a reminder, looking at the pier, it's about 725 feet long and 300 feet wide. So that's actually more than your sort of standard typical New York City block, quite large, which again is a good thing. It gives you lots of opportunities to do lots on you know, what would be a kind of resurfaced pier. Next. So we wanted to just share a couple sort of quick ideas and put some things out there, really also for scale, so you could start to see like what these types of activities could actually look like. What you're seeing to the north, the sort of T that's on the north side is an outdoor gym. On the south side is some sort of like, you know, a series of tents and or picnic tables. In the middle, there's a kind of more passive zone, as well as we show a couple of different lanes, for example, for learning to bike. These are all just pavement markings, furnishing, et cetera. And then on the end, an idea for a kind of dance floor and or roller rink. And so the idea here is that, you know, multiple different types of activities could coexist, just given the scale and the magnitude of the pier. And that they actually could be interchangeable in many ways with a sort of relatively flexible surface. Next. And that any of these scenarios could also be, you know, the seating or things could be folded and put away and could actually be the same surface could be used for a large scale event, whether it would be a Pride celebration or a concert series or an outdoor movie or a food festival, et cetera. So it's not predicated on the fact that you know, any of these scenarios wouldn't prohibit you from actually doing potentially a series of large scale events on the pier as well. Next. And then again, we just wanted to put out something else. It's not like these are meant to be final designs in any way. And so just to, again, give you a sense of scale or a different way that the pier could be potentially configured. To the north here, you're seeing a kind of community art display maker space with a series of tents and potentially different types of, you know, displays that could be changed throughout the year. There's a series of these sort of pods that are showing children's play, so sort of kid zones where you could have markings on the ground or different types of movable seats, maybe even a sand table, you know, things like that. It's showing a beer garden in the middle, which could be a really incredible kind of place to sort of take in the Hudson River as well as the views. And at the end, a kind of more passive relaxation zone where you could sort of have hammocks and lounge, cafe tables and chairs, et cetera, and potentially even a space for some of the education and public programming that Hudson River Park does along the estuary as well as with children. Next. And then once again, the idea is that, and you know, this type, any sort of format that would happen would not prohibit a larger scale event, you know, throughout the year if there was a calendar of events that could happen. Next. So these are just some fun, I hope, inspiring renderings to sort of show that the kind of liveliness and excitement of the pier and the scale of it could be really great. This is that first scenario shown. Actually, we included a kind of running track around the edge of the pier at different modes. And just for context, that track, I think I calculated it, and it's about 534 meters. So 400 meters is a sort of standard track if you just do the three edges. So you know, that's close to, you know, almost a half a mile. So that's pretty great. And you can see like passive zones as well as the idea of the dance floor roller rink on the end. And these are kind of just delineated based on pretty simple pavement markings and different types of furnishings, et cetera. We're also showing temporary lighting along the edge, solar lighting as well. Next. And again, the second scenario, again, showing the kind of beer garden in the middle, the kid zones at the end, and the kind of more passive area towards the end of the pier where you really get the sweeping views all the way actually where you can see the Statue of Liberty. Next. So I think just as a way to sort of prompt a conversation, and we wanted to kind of put a couple of different bubbles up here. Tonight's really about a kind of deeper dive into potential programming opportunities for interim use. And we kind of thought that there are these different general sort of ways that you could think about programming, whether it's education or food or relaxation or more active uses, sort of creative zones, potential pop-ups, as well as family activities. And we just tried to sort things in that way. And of course, there are probably others as well as a number of things that, you know, maybe are intentionally left off this list, right? So I think we wanted to hear both any concerns about particular interim uses and or ones that this community in particular feel like would really benefit the people. And, you know, I think that one of the things that is really exciting about this opportunity is, of course, not only to provide access soon and use soon, but also that it really have a high impact. And so that's sort of some of the ultimate goals of what we're hoping that this can achieve. So I think I'll turn it back to you, Jeffrey. You're an amazing MC, and I'll let you figure out how you want to start and initiate the conversation.
Sure. Thank you for this, Carl, Madeline. Thank you for walking us through this and getting us to where we are. I think everybody will say that we are really excited, but I do just want to frame the conversation before I hand it to Lowell, our board chair, to say a few things also. We love that the idea of interim is on the table to create this public space, but we are very cognizant of the fact that we don't want the interim to be too loved and to be too good, because we don't want it to become something that we can't make better through that permanent park planning process, which we have a great relationship working with the trust on getting. Pier 97, in the scope of our future. And so that's a big part of what we're sort of thinking through. And certainly I think that came across in our conversations at the task force as well. Lisa, I noticed a lot of rainbows, so thank you for that. And so with that, I want to pass it over to Lowell for a couple of comments before we begin to go to the committee. Committee members, if you have comments, you can start by raising your hand and I will take them in order. Lowell?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I want to just point out, I think most of you who are here know this. I am both the chair of Manhattan Community Board 4 and a member of the board of the Hudson River Park Trust. I am here tonight in my capacity as board chair. So I am not speaking on behalf of the trust. I am speaking on behalf of the community board. The trust has done this sort of interim use before. They did it very successfully at Pier 26 before that was converted over, at Pier 54 when it still existed, and at our own Pier 97, where we've held events, pride events, the Blues and Barbecue Festival, other things that the trust does on an ongoing basis. Because we are hopeful that construction is going to start on Pier 97 soon, sooner rather than later, that's not going to be available for those type of events. So that's the kind of thing we were thinking about to move to Pier 76. I'm also going to address a question and get this out of the way before anyone asks, okay? Before anyone says, when is the tow pound going to move? We are working on it on a parallel track. We have been meeting with the city regularly about this. We expect that the NYPD will be coming to the Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use meeting in December to talk about some possible locations to move the tow pound to, but that's the extent of what we've got right now. So it's really beyond the scope of tonight's meeting. So I hope I've answered that question for everyone in advance, and we don't have to worry about when is the tow pound moving. We're trying to look ahead here as to what can we do with not out a lot of money, coming in to build Pier 76, which would have to be funded by the commercial uses in all likelihood. What can we do now to give something back to the community that has waited over 20 years for Pier 76 to become a park? Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Lowell. David?
Hi, yeah, thanks. Regarding the office building option that was presented, I hope that's not entirely serious. It's antithetical to the open space that parks are all about. No one would ever propose putting an office building in Central Park. There's a reason that it would require a change to the law that created the Hudson River Park, the original act, and that is because the idea of the park that it would be about open space.
David, if I may, David, Pier 76 has always been identified as a commercial revenue generating pier. And while the original sentiment was that no more than 50% of the pier would be occupied by development, the point of that was to offset to pay for the open space and provide a revenue stream for the park. I think
the distinction that I'm making doesn't have to do with commercial space versus open space. It's office space versus other commercial space. So if you look at Bryant Park, which I understand has not taken public money since 1997, they do that by virtue of having a restaurant and lots of individual little concessions, food venues, even advertising on canopies for the food carts. To me, that's something that draws people into the park and allows them to enjoy the open space. It's closer to the open space ideal of a city park than an office building, which is enclosed massive space. It's what Midtown is made of, not what parks are made of.
David, again, just on the parallel there, Bryant Park also has a business improvement district with a guaranteed assessment, I think, of close to $15 million a year. So the struggle is we don't have guaranteed revenue streams for Hudson River Park. Pier 40, Pier 76, a couple of the other smaller commercial revenue generating piers exist, but this is sort of Board 4's shot in the arm, if you will. Lowell?
Jeffrey, if I could jump in here. I understand your concerns, David, but we're specifically not focused on that yet. We've basically decided to push all of those discussions downstream to the point where the economy recovers, and what can we do then? So whatever your concerns are about what will go up on the pier eventually is beyond the scope of our discussion tonight.
I'm getting to that. For the interim, I think that it would be useful to look at those concessions that were mentioned as an alternative and see what can be done with them. Use the interim period as a laboratory to see what kind of income potential those concessions have. You've got 50% of that huge pier that you could cover with, say, an outdoor food court, or with, I don't know, any kind of commercial purpose that is not as uninviting to the public as a hermetic office building, and use this as a time to test out what might work, and still not do something that's so appealing that people would never want to reverse it, so that we could perhaps avoid ever having office buildings there.
Madeline?
David, I just want to address, and I don't want to get off onto a conversation that really is meant for the future, but we are not like Bryant Park. We are a pier sitting in the Hudson River. So there really is no relationship to a swath of land sitting in the middle of Manhattan. This pier will have to be rebuilt if we want it in the future. The interim uses are going to be on a pier that already needs work in order to keep it in play. And the whole pier is to be able to get a number of years for interim use. But eventually, if you want to see a long-term plan, it's going to require having the pier totally rebuilt, which is costing a very large amount of money. And somehow that is going to have to be paid for. So it's going to have to be a little push and pull here, a little give and take. But that really is a conversation that we're happy to have with you going forward. But and it's complicated, and that was why the task force was created, because it is a complicated issue, not simple, about how to generate enough funds to be able to do everything that this community might want to have in the future. But also, please remember that this pier is really very large, and the kind of open space and on this pier, it would be one of the largest pieces of park in Hudson River Park. It would be quite spectacular no matter what it is. But in order to get there, there's going to have to be a compromise along the way.
Thanks, Madeline.
Does that mean that we're expecting office buildings?
All right, I'm going to shut this down.
David,
right now.
this is not, so the scope of discussion this evening is about interim use. And so based on the visuals that was put forth, really just thinking through what we might like, what isn't going to be too good to not get rid of, to create a permanent park that's on par with the rest of the piers that we know and love, is really what we're focusing on tonight. The time will come when we talk development, but that's not for tonight. So is there any comment specifically on interim use?
I would just continue that, use this period to test things like events and concessions and see how much can be earned. Just
I think that's,
consider it an interim laboratory. That's my final comment.
Thank you. Brad, are you WPE committee member?
Yes, hi, Jeffrey.
Go ahead. Hi, Brad.
I'd like to thank everybody's time today. It's a long time coming. How do we Madeline, how's it going to be funded? Is the money coming from the state for the interim use? Are they going to help with this?
We haven't quite gotten to the end of that conversation, but what we really want to do is focus on what uses you would like to see on this pier, and then we will continue to have conversations about how that's going to be paid for.
And two questions. Thank you, Madeline. I'll let Jeffrey follow up with that if he's got more. So that means the car club's going out during this interim phase? Wouldn't that be some revenue?
Yes, the car club, Classic Car Club does pay revenue, pay to the trust. And that's an exploration that we're having as well. So we're really at the beginning of the investigation about all of this. So there is not a firm answer on that, but we do like having Classic Car Club there, and as you know, revenue is always a plus for the trust.
I guess
so. In my mind, Madeline, I would think we try to keep, we demo the middle, keep that one wing, so there's some revenue coming in interim, and on the other wing, we build a wall there, and that could be another way to bring some income while we have the whole middle open to us. Just a thought. And I know we're not talking about future, but we are the environmental committee. And I've been saying this for a while. It'd be great to have a commercial garden company there.
Thanks, Brad. It did note on slide 18 that the interim use by 76 would, quote, be publicly funded. So is the anticipation that the state would step in here? Commissioner Sagos or Coolidge, I'm not sure on that angle, but given the thrust to make this happen, interim or not, it still costs money to maintain it. So I'm wondering what that looks like.
Sure, I'll take that and then pass it over to Eric if he's got any thoughts on that. I mean, as Madeline said, I think we're early in this. I mean, we still have a major barrier in the way in that the tow pound is still there. We're in discussions with our friends in the chamber to see, if we're to make advancements in removing the physical structure, what sorts of funding might be available in the near term. I mean, all of that is in flux right now, but really important to continue the 6 meetings that we've had so far, get back on with you all so we can start to plan. I think the idea is to not miss a beat on the planning side with you so that when we're ready on the budget side and everything else, it all comes together fairly quickly. That's the goal.
Okay.
Jeffrey, I have one more thing.
Sure, go ahead, Brad.
Let's say the money is short, and we all understand that. Madeline, do we have to tear it down and turn? Can we just open it up, clean up the inside? And I know it's enclosed, but it's still a big open space while we're waiting to get the funds. Like, let's say the tow pound moves out, then we got to wait to demo it, or can it just be used the way it is, just big and open, and we can still get creative there? Just a thought.
That could be a conversation. It is very dark in there. It's an old building with a bad roof, and so it will require funding to keep the building operating. But if you all thought that was a good option, we could certainly think about it. But it would not feel like as much like public space, because it is a very dark, long space. And I don't even think that the kind of lighting we could put in there would make that feel much, much different.
I'm just wondering though, Madeline, if we don't have the money and they move out, is it just going to sit there for 3 years? I'm just trying to, I know we don't have I know the chair said we don't know. I'm not bringing that up. But I'm just wondering,
Yep.
We should have a trigger saying if it's going to take longer than 2 years or 3 years, we should be doing something with this empty space.
I think, as the commissioner just said, that it seems very much so that the governor wants this to move along quite quickly, and that there are conversations going on in the chamber about this, how to fund this, how to get this moving. But the whole point here is that we are trying to ascertain from you what you would like to see there. And, you know, we're no strangers to you, so we don't have to have a formal meeting to have conversations that are ongoing about how this is progressing. But the intention here is to have this move as quickly as humanly possible.
Good.
Yeah, and just
Thank
to add
you.
to that, if I can, Jeffrey,
Please.
right, the intent really is to get the shed down, and bring the community board, bring the park open space as quickly as possible. So we can talk about the safety of the building, maybe the dangers that it poses to having use within the buildings. I think we can all agree that it's better to have it down in the interim rather than up. If the ultimate goal is to get people outside, breathing fresh air, moving around a little bit, and ultimately getting excited about it and behind a long-term transformational vision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's great.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Brad. Leslie.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I second Jeffrey, Lisa. I love the rainbows, such eye candy for the park. So we have a great need also in our district for the arts. We have a lot of independent theater companies. They are begging for outdoor space for some performances. And if this is so big, maybe, this is just if you guys would consider an interim use of maybe, I don't know, collaborating with some of our independent theater companies, and maybe they can put on in the spring, obviously, in the summer, some shows or some performances. And I think we probably would be one of the only places in Manhattan that would be able to do that right now. I know it's a big discussion. I don't know if you guys would consider that. And can I just switch gears real quick, Jeffrey, if the chair would allow me to speak about another pier, since I have Commissioner Sagos here really quickly?
Sure.
So the state has already committed to funding for Pier 97, and we just want to know what the timeline is for that, if there is one.
Just unmuting. Let me turn that over to Madeline, if she's got details on that.
Well, we're past 60% in construction drawings, and our intention is to keep moving forward and to hopefully go out to bid in this winter for a spring start of construction.
Great, Madeline, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Leslie. Marty.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I want to be respectful of the restraints that were put on David, but pick up that thread for interim uses. I didn't notice anywhere in the interim uses the possibility of some kind of marine, such a large pier. There should be a little section for environmental studies of the Hudson River estuary. And I say that as a interim, and we have to noodle it around, where would it be? How much would it cost? Is there a construction necessary? Can you put some sort of videographic stuff down under the water so you can see it above the water? Whole lot of stuff that goes into doing a marine museum. And that is an interim use. But I also thought, and here's where I'm crossing the line, sorry, that it might be a long-term use of the pier if there is funding for a marine museum of some kind on the pier that would bring in money, maybe not as much money as you would like, but enough money to support the pier. A marine museum is missing in this part of town, and some work on that I think would be really, really well received.
Marty, it's, if you go back to one of the renderings, earlier renderings, at least it was the intention that we showed some tents that had our Hudson River Park River project on that. So
was that the tent on the north side of the track?
That was it, Marty. But I mean, obviously, we have a very strong education and research team. I also want to let you know that we just published our first paper on microplastics.
Would you share that with our committee, please?
Certainly, we're very proud of that. That was published, I think this at the end of last week. So we're certainly happy to share that with you.
Hot off the press.
Pardon me, hot off the press, yes. It's 4 years in the making. But we have a very active group. We do monitor the waters, as you well know. We do have plans for an estuarium. We also will have a site in Pier 57, which you'll hear more about shortly. So we're going to have a presence for the river project, really very strong in Community Board 4, as well as in other parts of the park. And, you know, a lot of those projects will be unveiled not only shortly, but there's no reason that we cannot have a pretty robust program on Pier 76, whether it's interim or future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Brett.
Thank you. Yeah, so given the location near the Javits Center, not too far from the aircraft carrier, the Intrepid and all that, I see this as a good location to continue the trend of this is where we have our tourism and our entertainment in our district along the waterfront. And kind of following David somewhat, I don't mind having an interim use that's so beloved that we don't have to debate later on whether or not we're going to put an office building there or not. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Brett. Colin.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Commissioner and Ms. Wells. Great presentation, and I think it's, you know, this is a very exciting process that's happening. I don't really have any specific suggestions for interim use of the park, but following up to what Leslie said earlier, I hope that, you know, in the interim time, especially now that we have so many nonprofits in the city that are really struggling right now, that a portion of the park could be set aside for low or free use of local nonprofits, whether that's to fundraise or to put on, you know, theater programming like Leslie suggested, or, you know, some sort of blank space that could be set aside specifically for that purpose, I think would be really helpful to a lot of nonprofits in the city. You know, we hopefully wouldn't cut into Pier 60's, you know, brisk business during normal times, but something along those lines I think would be a great use of the park. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Christopher.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for the presentation, everybody. I've been on this committee for almost 5 years now. I didn't think this was going to happen, so I'm incredibly excited. I'm also incredibly excited to hear other members of this committee after me bringing it up 2 months ago about public use of park space to support our independent theaters. I'm really glad that Leslie and Colin have gotten on board. I know we've had this conversation also on ACEs. So as this begins to snowball into something larger and we recognize the scale and scope of this pandemic as it affects the arts, I do hope that we can set aside space and that we can have a larger conversation on this committee as well as on ACEs and on the board as how we can be friends to our to our neighbors in independent in the independent theater companies. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Alan.
Good evening. Thank you, and thank you for a great presentation. Nothing specific. I think there's some very good ideas on the presentation and some very good ideas coming out tonight and going down the road. But down the road, as we think about what specifics we put in as interims, depending on, as you do your inspections of the pier, once you demolish the tow pound, that perhaps we think about picking items that might be able to be reinforced and remain on the pier as we go into that far off permanent situation, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and maybe cut down on the final installation of the pier so that some of the things that we think about today remain on going forward into the more permanent pier.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was just going to say sort of an adaptive reuse element to your thinking, Alan, right? Okay, Madeline?
No, I was just going to reiterate what I had said before about the pier's long-term viability. And so it, I think we could get quite a few years out of it now, but in terms of having a long-term pier, one that would last at least 50 years as other Hudson River Park piers are built, it would likely need to be rebuilt in a more modern fashion.
Madeline, can I jump in for a second, Jeffrey? Where you said
go ahead, then I'm going to go to Blake.
I know you said more modern fashion. Now, I know the answer to this, but it may be helpful to explain what's holding up the pier right now and what you mean by a more modern fashion.
So the pier consists of 6,500 wood piles, which are about 12 inches wide. And modern piers are not made of wood. And that is because, and you've all read about this, you know about this, that the worms are eating the wood. And most of the piers that have existed in the Hudson River need to be jacketed. But when you have 6,500 piles that need to be jacketed, it is far more money to jacket those piles than it is to build a modern pier with concrete or steel piles. That would probably be, and I'm not going to give you a real number, but probably a third of the number of piles that currently exist, and ones that will be much easier to maintain moving forward. So that is the state of play. Nobody will build a wooden pier anymore. And as long as the Hudson gets cleaner, the more that the marine borers will work harder to infest those wooden piers.
So it's a sign of a healthier river that our piers are being eaten.
That's right.
In a sense, got it. Blake.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you for the presentation. One point I wanted to raise was, just a suggestion about supporting local businesses on the pier, and giving the pier a bit more of a local character. I think a lot of the people visiting the city who come to the Javits Center think of going eastward to Times Square, but I'm wondering if the pier could have more of a west side feel, and support local businesses for the concessions. Maybe theme it around something unique to this particular district. And I think that also is manifested in the fees arrangement with the kinds of concessions that are on the pier. Obviously local businesses will be coming out of the recession similar to the state and local governments. So ensuring that while the trust can make some money off of it, it also might be an opportunity for struggling local businesses as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Blake. I think a key point to include there for sure is type of concession, and from where. Any other members of the committee who have not spoken have anything to add at this point or questions to raise? Seeing none, I'm going to go to the public. Janine, if we can bring over Emily and Susanna. Hi, Emily.
Hi, this is Emily from Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal's office. I didn't raise my hand or have a question, but I'm just here listening.
Gotcha. I thought I saw your hand go up, but we're happy to have you over on the panelist side. Susanna.
No,
Hey guys, thank you. I am on the board of the Friends of Hudson River Park, and I'm also on the board of Community Board 2. First of all, I want to just thank you for I have some comments about the interim use and a couple of questions about the long-term use. I wanted to congratulate you on these beautiful visions for the interim use. I grew up when these piers were just empty piers, and we had a lot of recreation on them when they were just big sheets of asphalt. So the idea of enhancing that is very exciting. I'd be interested in spending as little money as possible on an interim use. So the way that you have conceived of just these painted surfaces is incredibly exciting. You guys in CB4 are better at addressing what your community needs are from this interim use. I mean, I think that the track is incredibly exciting. Spaces for skating and bike riding are very exciting. And of course, what you talk about, the arts performances and local businesses, maybe a flea market, all makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask of Carl just a couple of questions about the long-term plan, which I know is not the focus of tonight, but this is all a new subject to me. In your study, do you know what the anticipated revenue is from development once this pier is built out as it will be?
We don't. And again, as I tried to say, the goal is to see how we can find as many alternative revenue sources as we possibly can to reduce the need for long-term revenue on Pier 76. Although we think there will be, for sure, a need for long-term revenue on Pier 76. We just don't know how much. And obviously, we did some work pre-pandemic, and the economics are certainly right now in flux. But the goal has always been, from the task force perspective, to try to find as many alternative uses as possible, alternative income sources as possible, so that we can maximize the open space on Pier 76 and minimize how much revenue we'll ultimately need from that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I asked because obviously Pier 40 and Pier 76 are sharing a load together. And for Pier 40, we've had many discussions over the development, and we did have a target revenue figure. And I'm guessing that what you're saying is that there is no such thing developed at this point for Pier 76 or for the tag team of Pier 40 and Pier 76.
Yeah, I think the only conclusion we really can make right now is that in the long term, when the park is built out and stabilized, we will, as much as we can maximize alternative revenue sources, we're going to need permanent revenue, ongoing stable revenue from Pier 76 and Pier 40. How much? We don't know, and hopefully, you know, less is more in terms of
better, yeah.
open space.
And just one last thing, because I recognize that when it comes to creating commercial uses that will bring in that revenue, you know, we can't really dictate those uses. We really have to work with a private market and what the market is willing to pay for. But we've had a lot of political concerns in the development at Pier 40. And so one concern I would have for the interim use is essentially what Jeffrey said before, which is you don't want it to become too beloved. Once you put it down, it's very hard to take it back up. And so, you know, there's a part of me that would love to just see a part of the pier closed off so that you don't have to have that battle down the road. But that's just one point of view. Anyway, thank you. It's very exciting plans.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks for those comments and the input. Sally, we'll go to you, and then Janine, if we can bring the next two members of the public over, Anthony Borelli and Joe Rose. But for now, Sally, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering, with all this discussion, are the piers autonomous, or income from 40 help out 76, or vice versa? Although 40 is the really large pier, but if Pier 40 has enough income down the road, does that help 76, or 76 has to stand on its own?
I'll answer that. We need the park. I hope you would all agree that the park has never looked better. We have put a lot of resources to making this really a world-class park. As we are expanding the park, as we open Pier 26, as we open Pier 55, Little Island, as we open new esplanades, moving up to Pier 97, all these spaces require more maintenance money, more operational, more security. And in order to keep this park going in a manner that hopefully you agree you would like to see it in the future, we are going to need, with no exception, to maximize whatever open space on these park commercial piers, but also maximize on the smallest footprint the commercial space as well. So we can have a discussion moving forward about what that looks like, what kind of uses can reap enough money on the smallest footprint versus taking up more park space. That's all for a future discussion, but we will not find a way to continue to satisfy the needs of the park and its constituents without continuing to find more revenue for this park in the future. We're about on the road to finishing about 20% more public park space on an over 4 mile park. And the alternatives there are to share the resources we currently have or to find new resources. So Pier 76 is part of that equation to find new resources. And we don't look at the revenue from each commercial pier as only maintaining the land around it. It's one bucket of money. It's one budget. We treat all parts of the park equally in terms of our maintenance and operations, and it's all pooled and it's all used to maintain the whole park.
Thanks, Sally. And just as a matter of fact, Sally, so you know, the vast majority of revenue the park gets is made within Community Board 4. So we do float a lot of the funding that goes to supporting the park in Board 2 and Board 1.
Okay, thank you. And it was a wonderful presentation, and there were so many great ideas. I'm looking forward just to the interim if we ever get there.
Thanks, Sally. Anthony?
Hi, I'm Anthony Borelli. I'm a resident of 35th Street, 35th and 10th. I'm also a member of the Friends Board, but I'm definitely talking as a local resident and a planner by profession. I think Pier 76 is a tremendous opportunity. Obviously, you know, it's important to the city, it's important to the region, it's really important to the park. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it really does need to serve community purposes first and foremost. I don't like the idea of having it be tourist oriented, for example. And I think our neighborhood in Hell's Kitchen in the 30s in particular really deserves community oriented spaces like so many other parts of the park have, particularly to the south. So that's my main point, is that I do want to make sure that the uses that are there on an interim basis really are about serving the community first and foremost, not to neglect the financial responsibilities and the idea that programming should generate certain funds. Which is why I really like the idea of sort of like raising it and creating a blank slate for many types of flexible uses that can be just for fun, can be for revenue generating, can be for celebration. I think it's going to be an amazing space. And so that's generally. Personally, I really want to see a dog-friendly beer garden.
Anthony, I was going to say, I know how much you like that beer garden.
With your dog drink beer?
Right, not just a dog park, but a beer garden with a sort of, yeah, okay, that's
we'll have babysitting for dogs.
I was gonna say, I take a challenge. I take that as a challenge. Can I design a beer garden picnic table for dogs, please?
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Was there anything else besides that niche request at the end that's really good to know?
No, I really just wanted to sort of like be on the record to say that I think moving forward with an interim plan is really great, and maybe somewhat related to the beer garden. I mean, if we had a beloved interim use, you know, I wouldn't hate that so much. I mean, you know, we as much as I know that things have to change, beloved uses have lasted a really long time in other parts of the park. And I think the West 30s deserve a similar opportunity to enjoy the park in its own way.
Thank you. Joe.
Hi there, everybody. I didn't realize that dogs drank beer, but I think this is all extremely exciting. And so Joe Rose, among other things, a member of the task force on behalf of Friends. I get this is a question. I know you're having a presentation from the PD in December, and I heard the commissioner and chair talking about how important an agenda item this is for the governor. Just a timing question in terms of what we're up against here, because you know, here we are in the middle of November. You know, are we talking weeks or months in terms of our ability to our collective endeavor to get something in place? Because if we really are talking in terms of weeks, I'm not talking necessarily January 1st, then we sort of got to be working around the clock on this. So just, is there a sense of just some time frame that we collectively have to get to the interim planning?
Why don't I weigh in there? I would say, look, let's proceed best case scenario, recognizing that the CB4 may not be unified in what it wants to see. If there's the sort of the best case scenario where we get the tow pound soon, we get it on the deadline, then we launch this process for taking the shed down. I mean, better to know all that at the outset, better to know what this is going to look like once we finish it. Again, we're not, to everyone's points, we're not talking about, you know, designing something magnificent and large and permanent. These are largely interim uses. So, I mean, even this conversation tonight has me feeling like we're fairly close to what we could be putting in place. You know, the dog beer garden, the track, the space for theater. I mean, there's a lot of space there. I think it's all about how do you move those puzzle pieces around, and we're going to look to you all to hopefully give us that vision by the end of this year when we're expecting to get the tow pound.
I just wanted to add to that. I mean, I think one of the things that is hopefully a little comforting in the process is that I think any of these sort of scenarios that we put out there that you're adding to, you know, they require a couple things, right? Likely, obviously, the tow pound being relocated and the shed being demolished, but then it's really about, you know, a sort of minimal resurfacing of the pier, some stabilization along the edges of the pier for safety, some temporary lighting. These things would be required no matter what the end sort of use surface is. So there's a lot that could sort of happen to prepare that quote unquote blank slate, you know, while the uses are being confirmed afterwards.
And I would like to add to that to remember that it's interim and all the uses are interim and they can change overnight. And if you just look at in a normal year what Hudson River Park would do, we have over 400 events in the park over a summer, and you will see ballroom dancing, salsa dancing. We draw 3,000 people on a weekly basis in a normal year to our salsa dancing. So we have exercise, and we have, you know, even on Pier 84, we have Tai Chi, we have jazz. So there's so many, besides the events, you could have a bike riding and then at night have salsa. So, I mean, everything here is interchangeable. And that's really the beauty of interim, is that if you don't like something, we can change it.
Thank you, Madeline. Lowell.
All right, now I'm just going to put on my community resident hat because I'm going to follow on what Anthony was saying. At the corner of 30th and 10th, when Hudson Yards was being built, there was one summer that there was a combination beer garden that was ringed by food trucks that many of you may remember. I think that would be a great use. I'm going to give away my age here a little bit. I also grew up going to concerts at Pier 84, and I wouldn't mind something like that happening there because the only residents are, you know, the Hudson Yards residents, and they're 80 stories up, so they won't hear it anyhow.
Or they're in the Hamptons.
Right, or they're in the Hamptons, or they live in China and have
I
never.
was going to say, or they don't live there on a permanent basis.
So I love those two, you know, kinds of ideas.
Yeah, we had a wonderful couple of years at Pier 97. If you remember, we had a, you know, terrific concert series there with Live Nation. And I think that was very, very popular.
As long as the speakers are facing New Jersey.
And if you'll notice in Lisa's renderings, the attendees faced Manhattan and the speakers faced New Jersey. So they had it set out correctly.
We learned that lesson early on.
Good. I want to be cognizant of our.
By Jeffrey. A lot of people noticed that. Thank you for
that. Tony, I see your hand up, though before you said to not acknowledge your hand. So Janine, can you bring Tony over? But with that, I want to encourage the committee. I don't see any more hands coming from the public. So encourage the committee to be thinking through what will be next phase of discussion tonight for, I have some summary points that we can come up with for consideration and recommendation, but let's get to a point of a letter here that, as nice as broad strokes are, actually gives the state and the trust some real guidance here. Tony?
Tony?
There he is. Tony, are you here? All right, well, oh, Connie, is that you?
I don't see Connie logged in though.
Hey, yeah, I am.
Hi, go ahead, Connie.
Lowell actually just asked what I was going to ask. And that was some of the best events that have happened over the years in Hudson River Park since the very beginning were because we had these giant, empty, old, ugly, big piers that you could put thousands of people on. And, you know, that's how a lot of the current activities got started. So, you know, that's how Blues Barbecue started. That's how the movies started. That's how the dances started. And slowly, a good thing happened, which is they all got developed into parks. But it's would be great to have something that could be flexible enough that you could do those things again, at least in the interim.
Yeah, we have, I think we all, or most of us agree on that. And, you know, we have these wonderful events like the volleyball finals and, you know, the pride dances and food and wine. There's just, and with Pier 92 not being available for a lot of these events, this pier could certainly be an alternative to that.
While Wendy and Noreen and Susanna and Lowell recall the days past about concerts, what is useful to see is that it sounds like that is something we would be interested to entertain here, both on an interim use and potentially considering how that can be folded in long-term, though we're not there tonight. If there's no other comments or questions from the public, I want to bring it back to committee for what sounds like it should be, saw that wave, Susanna, thanks for being here, a fairly straightforward discussion. We can use the raise hand function again, but just to summarize some of the comments I heard, to allow for interchangeable uses across the board, concerts, performance arts, perhaps with direct connections to the small theaters and production companies in Community Board 4, community-minded uses that are reflective of the West Side and also meet the needs of the community on the West Side, spaces for celebration, for recreation, in particular the track on the perimeter of the park, of the pier. There was also consideration that if we do need to keep any semblance of structure, we still should work to open up the middle as much as possible. And, you know, marine use as well, some type of connection, education aspect, tying the pier to the river, which we've always been, you know, interested in. But besides a beer garden for dogs and people, did I miss anything, or does somebody want to add something a bit more specific to this list?
Food trucks.
Food trucks or food options, because Blake mentioned concessions and how that could tie into West Side businesses.
Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to talk about funding in this, but maybe also that the state should provide all needed funding for 76, 97, whatever else you want to throw in there.
State provide funding for the interim use.
Yeah, it's up to you. I don't know if this is the appropriate place for it.
When has the community board maintained a level of where to insert themselves into things here? So
Jeffrey, what
Alex,
about?
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a comment, but yeah, I had my hand up, but yeah. So everything you said, I agree with. There does seem to be no mention of kitty. I had sent some suggestions in earlier. I like with all the colors and designs, particularly the track along the edge, I'd like to see some inclusion of space where kids can ride tricycles and scooters. That's just designated for children. It seems everything that we have talked about is mostly adult oriented. And I think kids really need a place to learn to ride their bikes and be on their scooters.
We
So
agree, we agree, Sally, we agree. We had a learn to ride bikes on Pier 54 before it kind of fell down. And that's why on one of the scenarios that we happen to show bike riding. And so we also think that we need a place where kids can learn to bike and just, and with the
I just want to I want it reinforced in our letter. You know, I saw
Sally, I
all
think
those
it's
things.
great. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Brad?
Jeffrey, do you want to say anything about ferries?
I think that it's out of scope. We had identified Pier 79 as a potential. Here, it's just to the north. It's an existing ferry terminal. And you know me, I never miss a moment to plug for ferry service, but I'm not sure it actually fits here. So.
And then my other one would be, you know, we kind of touch about it, but could there be we have to activate the water. So maybe there's a use, because I know we have the canoes up the road, but maybe to activate some way the water. I know we do fishing. And I also want to thank Wendy for really helping this. I know she's helped out a lot. And I'd like to thank Lowell. Thank you guys.
Well, we love fishing. We have a very large fishing program, as some of you may know. This is a very active boating area for non-motorized boats. So there's ferries. Pier 78 is a private ferry. So there is on the north side, there's a lot of activity, but we can have calmer activities on the south side. The south side is also very, very shallow, by the way.
Brett.
Yeah, just I think with food, isn't there some kind of ban on disposable containers and whatnot that would make food trucks and things like that a challenge?
Well, we are the first park, as you know, to have started a program called Park Over Plastics, and we work with all our tenants. So if we had a concession there, they would have to follow the rules. A Park Over Plastic agreement would be within their permit. So they would have to basically use either compostable or recyclable materials.
Got it. Thanks for that, Brett. I continue to see comments about food, which are useful. So that will definitely be included. Sally's point on dedicated space for children use, especially as it relates to learning how to ride a bike, is important. Anything new overall here? Anthony? Nope.
Muted.
Nope.
How's
There you
that?
go.
Yeah, I was, small comment. I just wanted to mention that, you know, while we're thinking about the pier, we should think about how to get to the pier. And most people from the neighborhood will be getting to the pier from inland. So how do you get there from 34th Street and how do you cross the highway? Maybe that should be part of the planning for the interim use.
Yeah, that's a very good point. To consider access besides those who are already on that side of the highway. Thank you for that. I think this is extremely exciting that we are entertaining a public use of Pier 76 tonight, interim or otherwise, and the options are great. I think that the list is long, but I think it's actually very achievable based on what was laid out. Any other comments, questions, things to add specifically on this? I'll go through the summary again, which is going to be a bit jumbled still, and then I'd like to entertain a motion to turn this into a letter. So, interchangeable uses across the board with consideration for specific areas dedicated to having kids learn how to ride their bikes or roller skate, performance, concert, art spaces, track use on the edges of the pier, food options, food trucks, concessions, connection to the water, perhaps physical connection to the water, but also as it relates to education and marine uses. Consideration for access to the pier from east of 9A, how you get across the highway, how one gets to 76 safely if you're not in a car. And then the consideration for funding and how that's going to happen to make sure the interim use can happen.
How about the consideration of renewable energy? We've talked about wind on the last pier. Obviously, I know the park will use solar for the lights, hopefully, but maybe we should let's add something to the letter about that.
That if there's an energy need there, it should come from a renewable source. Brad, does that sound appropriate?
Be great to try it, yes.
Okay.
I also like the idea of having, if it's possible, some of that outdoor equipment for adults to use while they're watching their kids ride their bikes. Just pull-up bars, you know, not expensive stuff, but something that adults can use physically for outdoor fitness.
Got it. Sounds good, Sally.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you for that. With the direct connection to the west side and CB4, definitely will include that in there. Marty?
On the energy, don't forget that we, in the presentation, the lighting was solar. So that's a good thing. I think the Brad's remark meant other energy than just lighting.
Absolutely. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion? That means you need to unmute yourself.
I'll make the motion.
Thank
I'll
you,
make the
Leslie. Is there
motion.
a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Chris. Any opposed to this exciting letter? Any abstentions or present not eligible? With that, unanimous passage to support these various interim uses on Pier 76, which is really exciting.
Jeffrey's giddy, I think.
I am a little giddy about this. Commissioner Sagos, Commissioner Kulisek, if you're still here, anything to add or close with? I'm going to give it back to the trust also for any closing comments.
No, thanks so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure being with you tonight. We'll have many conversations from here on out, but it's all very positive. Thank you.
Great. Madeline?
Thank you all very much. Nice to see you. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for that presentation. Just committee, we're done with our formal items, but wondering if anybody else has any new business or questions to raise, separate and apart. Bye, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thanks, everybody.
Jeffrey, I had a question.
Yes, please.
The DEP site on 10th Avenue, do we have a timeline for that currently for that park space?
I believe that's being heard at Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use in 2 weeks. I don't know if it relates to the green space or not, Lowell.
It doesn't relate to the green space, but the green space is dependent on the supportive housing, the affordable housing that's supposed to go up on that site. And that is being heard by the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee
next Thursday.
Before Thanksgiving. It's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving they got moved.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, everybody, for your great work. That's all.
Sure. Any other bits of new or old business?
Did Lowell tell us when the tow pound's leaving? Oh, I'm sorry.
Lowell is moving the tow pound himself.
I am
this
moving
weekend.
the cars. I'm
What a
getting off
Herculean
this
feat.
call. I'm getting off this call. I'm going to start taking all of the cars off tonight. I am parking them on 22nd Street, Brad.
That's great, buddy.
I thought we decided we're going to send them to Albany.
That's fine.
It's going to take me longer to drive up there. I'm going to park them
That's a
on
bouquet.
22nd Street so Brad and Alan can have whatever they want.
Well, you really do the
We
most.
have a very large parking lot on 22nd Street right next to Brad's car.
I'll tell you what,
They'll driving the tow truck.
there's so many movies on our block, we never get to park anyway.
Yeah.
There's a parking lot. It's called Hudson Yards if you want to move them there.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
I want to also, I know, Wendy, thank you for being here this evening and tuning in. Anything to share or add based on the conversation?
Is everybody else gone? Is it just the committee?
The committee's here and we have 14 members of the
Elected
public
reps.
also. We're still in business session. I was just asking if you had anything to,
Well, it wasn't really apropos of the current discussion. You know, I think the conversation was great. As always, the committee asks great and important questions. You know, the interim use is very exciting, or the concept of interim use. I think that, you know, really key is to find out if the state is engaging with the city, because it's my understanding that the city has been trying to engage with the state on, you know, where the tow pound could move. You know, I think that, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Intrepid site is not necessarily the board's #1 choice. But as we saw in the letter that the city wrote to the state, they're, you know, also looking at the marshaling yards. But we need to find out if this state is engaging, and encourage the state obviously to be engaging, because what we ultimately want is for the city to be leading ASAP. And the city needs the state's help to do that.
we are,
Jeffrey?
Go ahead, Lowell.
David, I promise you we will have the discussion you want to have when we get there. We're still a couple of years away from that discussion, probably because of the pandemic. Is Susanna Aaron still here?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I don't mind throwing CB2 under the bus. Part of the problem with Pier 40 is they can never reach an agreement as to, you know, what they want to see on that pier. And it gets hung up about, should we tear down the existing structure, which is falling down? Should we rehabilitate it? Should we build something new? And because of the inertia Nothing changes there. And it's going to get to the point where pieces of that building are going to start falling on the ball field, and the ball field is going to have to be closed. I mean, Noreen may have more information she wants to share about that, or Noreen may wish I never mentioned her name. But that's been the problem, and that's what we were specifically trying to avoid here. We have Governor Cuomo's attention to give us some sort of open space, and to bog it down with a discussion of something that is 3 or 4 years down the line just didn't make sense tonight. We had, you know, his commissioners here. There was a rep here from the governor's office who was in listen only mode. And we want this to happen because we want the tow pound moved and we want the open space. So that's why I shut you down, David, and why we handled it the way we did. But I promise you there will be a time and a place for that discussion.
Thank you, Lowell. And thank you, everybody. It was one item on the agenda tonight, but it was a big one and an exciting one. So if there's no other business, then we leave it at that, and we'll see you all at in the neighborhood or on the next Zoom.
It was so great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Everyone stay safe.
Bye.
Night.